So in the past, I'm talking about years past, you might have seen this in your rearview mirror and you got kind of scared. You're like, oh no, the cops are coming. No, this isn't a cop car. This is a Mercury Marauder. Let's take a look at this really sweet car. Let's get started. Oh, and by the way, welcome back to the Wizard Shop. I forgot to tell you guys that. Not only is this not a cop car, it is Hoovie's car from 3 years ago. This was Hoovie's Mercury Marauder. You guys have seen a video on that 3 years ago. He bought this at an auction and did a video on it, did some things with it, and then he sold it. 3 years later, this customer is the new owner of it. There's been a few changes here or there, but pretty much it's just like the way it was when it was in Hoovie's Garage video. If you haven't seen that video, there'll be a link below in the description to go see Hoovie's Garage video on this car. This is a 2003 Mercury Marauder with a 4.6 liter. It is the Panther platform, which is Crown Victoria, Grand Marquis, and Marauder, and Lincoln Town Car as well. It's here for a few reasons. It's got a window issue, a radio issue, a dash issue, some drivability issues, and we're going to go ahead and take a look around the car. Let's go ahead and start under the hood. This, however, is not your standard 4.6 liter. This one has a little bit more power. This one's a little over 300 horsepower. And as you can see, the valve covers look a little bit differently. This one has double overhead cams. And I'm not sure, but I believe that this is the Intech V8, which is a little bit more powerful version, upgraded version of the 4.6 liter. It doesn't look very hard to work on, and it's not. The water pump's a cinch to do. A lot of things on here fairly simple to repair. It's got good power and good sound. It's really a pretty good motor. These go for a long time. Go ahead and look around the vehicle. You can see in the front it kind of does have that old cop car look to it since it's black. I would be a little afraid 10-15 years ago if I saw this in my rearview mirror. It's got the factory Mercury Marauder wheels. It's got a little wear and tear here and there, but it's not like it's a year or two old. It's almost 20 years old. These were made for only 2 years. There were a bunch of Marauders made in the mid and late 60s. They kind of revamped it and came out with this model on the Panther platform for 2003 and 2004. When Hoovie used to own this word Marauder was red. It was painted red. Somebody has gone through and painted it black so it didn't stick out so much. You can see some of the red paint here.
And that is a very special paint job.
Yep. Luckily, it doesn't seem to be dented or beat up or anything. Through the 2 years that they made this car, they made just a little over 11,000 of them. So in the world of cars where Honda Civics, there can be 500,000 or 1.5 million of them on the road, there's only 11,000 of these. It's a very small number in reality. Really a cool car. I think it's a neat looking car. Let's take a look at the interior.
Okay, ladies and gents, so well, normally I tell you how many miles it has, but we're missing that part of the car today, so we can't tell you that part. And I can't talk to you much about the radio because that part is also missing. But we can talk about the dash. Look at that. This has lived in a garage all of its life. Look at that dash. Not one crack. If we look down, we've got like a pre-fiber kind of thing going on across the entire span of the dash. Nice and shiny. Does have some simple, controls for your climate, your HVAC, and has some really cool gauges down there that were stock that came with this model. You do see that it is an automatic, and you'll see that we do have a little bit of test equipment there, and I think the customer must have been driving on the turnpikes because there's lots of change in there. The seats are leather, and this is the generation of seats that feel like a sofa, so this is a really comfortable seat. There is a small little tear in the seat there that, they could get that repaired, or they do make a product. It's on our Amazon affiliate called Masta Plasta. It's a very odd name for it, but it does a great job in, just kind of covering up those little faux pas. On the front of the seat, and it's on both sides, there is a little pocket here. So that's kind of reminiscent of old kind of grandpa cars we might think of, where you can keep, I guess, your essential documents. Being that this looks like a cop car, maybe that's where they would keep their, insurance in case they did get stopped. And if we look at the back seat, why, there's the other side of the door panel. Again, the Car Wizard channel, we do show you things that you don't normally get to see, which does include the back side of door panels. Otherwise, the seats are looking pretty good. There's a little bit of a tear there, and again, that Mastoplasta sticker could easily cover that up. Headliner-wise, if we span up there, it is looking good, nothing sagging. It does have the center console area and a light, and just a few more controls there. So, not a lot going on in here, especially since so much of it is missing, but I have a feeling the Car Wizard's going to fill us in on that. So why don't we move back to the Wizard?
Okay, so now we're going to go over the issues of why it's here. The first issue, the customer states that driving it here, it stalled 5 times. It has very low power, and it's going through gasoline like it's going out of style. Let's go ahead and open the hood again. So to solve this issue, I think another mechanic worked on it or something before we have, and must be needs new injectors. Oh, well, let's put new injectors on it. Oh, well, let's do a fuel pump. Let's look at the fuel pump. Let's change this out. Change out the throttle position sensor, on and on and on, without looking at any data. And you guys know, for me, that's a facepalm moment. Just like, oh my goodness. So we are going to look at data and see what is going on. I suspect, based on the engine codes we have where both banks are running lean, I suspect a mass airflow sensor from experience. But we're not just going to shotgun parts. We're going to look at data and see, is that really the problem? Let's get our handy dandy Autel MS908 fired up, and that will give us the answers we need. So here we have our scan tool hooked up, and we're looking at mass airflow grams per second. 0. There was a few times it would show 0.002. If we revved it, it would go to 0.003. Most of the time it would show 0. We've checked the connections, the power, the grounds, everything's good. The airflow sensor is dead, and there's more to that story. So we've used our MS908 to get a definitive answer again, a very powerful tool in the shop. So when I see that, I think, well, the factory airflow sensor has failed, or, which is very common, an aftermarket sensor has failed. Let's take a look. DL stands for Duralast, which means AutoZone. This is not the factory airflow sensor. This is an aftermarket one that are like 60 or 80 bucks, and that's usually the option people choose because they're only 60 or 80 bucks. And unfortunately, that option usually lasts about 6 months to a year. And that's it, and it's dead. You can change it out for warranty and get another one, and it'll last 6 months to a year, and it'll stall and have all the troubles again. It never fails when I quote a price to say, hey, we can change that out with a factory OEM high quality airflow sensor, but it's going to be like 300 bucks. And they're like, oh my God, I don't want to spend that. And I'm like, you want to keep going with the $60 shotgun every 6 months, put a new one on? Because I've been doing this for over 20 years. This has never failed to be an issue. It's always been an issue. So that's nothing new to me. In fact, when I started hearing the symptoms, it just kind of came to mind. I was like, probably an aftermarket airflow sensor. Sure enough, I opened the hood. There it is. I got my MS908 hooked up and verified. Yep, that's what it is.
Okay, so Car Wizard, does it hurt to put them in, to keep the cheap aftermarket ones in? Will it hurt any other components?
It could run lean and could damage your catalytic converters. But other than that, I mean, it's just going to make it run really bad and stall and have issues. The issues that they can cause when they start to fail are going to be so drastic that you're not going to want to put up with it and try to make it last. Because if on your way to work it stalls 5 times, you're going to be like, this, I've had enough, this is enough. And catalytic converters can be into thousands of dollars, at least $1,000. Why not just spring for the $300 sensor and be done for years, not a few months? Don't buy the aftermarket airflow sensors or auction sensors. Don't do it, guys. You just saw a minute ago with Mrs. Wizard doing a tour of the interior that everything was apart. No, the car didn't show up that way. We have caused it to be that way because we are diagnosing more problems. Let's take a look.
Thanks, Wizard. I kind of needed a break sitting down on these lovely cushy cushions here.
They are very comfortable seats. They really are. They're very nice. So you guys saw the door panel was off. It's because there's an issue with the window, the actual window going up and down. You had to tape the window up. We removed the panel and removed this white plastic, and this is what we have. Broken window regulator. I mean, it's broken into smithereens, guys. Wasn't even holding up the window anymore. Oh my goodness, it's falling apart just holding it. Let me get this out of the way. Ugh. Anyways, yes, that thing is completely shot. The customer did supply a new one. We'll get that installed. These are kind of a pain because everything under this is rivets. Even the parts that mount to the glass itself are rivets. So this is a job that's more time consuming. You have to be very careful because if you get careless, you could break their glass and smash that into smithereens, and you don't want to do that. This is not a half-hour, 1 hour job. This is probably a couple of hours to do this one. The next complaint is the customer said they were listening to their tunes on their radio and it just shut off. It's done. It won't do anything, he said. We did take the radio out. We changed out the fuse with another one just to be sure. It still would not power up. Let's go ahead and check powers and grounds. Here's our connector that goes to the radio. If we can prove that we have accessory power, battery power, and good ground, then there is no other excuses, especially with a brand new fuse, that this won't turn on other than the unit is dead. Let's find out. You guys know I like clear answers. Let's get those clear answers here. I'm going to go ahead and plug this into ground, and no, I'm not damaging the pins because it is perfectly the same size as the original pins. So Mrs. Wizard's got the key turned on for me. We got our ground hooked up to the ground wire. Let's go ahead and test for accessory. Yes, we have a good strong voltage there. Let's go ahead and test the main battery here. Yep, we have good battery, good ground, and good accessory power. Now I do have an incandescent bulb. It's actually an 1157 bulb that I use to load test grounds and powers to be sure does it have good strong power. I did use that here and it has good strong power. So with a good fuse, good accessory, good power, and good ground, there is no more excuses why this will not turn on other than the unit itself is dead. The customer's going to swing by later today. He's actually going to pick this up and send it in for warranty work because this has been proven to be dead. So that is guaranteed diagnosis. So as you can see, the cluster is missing because it was having issues with the tachometer and also the temperature gauge. On this engine, the temperature sensor sends its signal to the PCM and then straight to the temperature gauge. There is no secondary gauge-only temperature sender on this car. We proved that the gauge was the problem. Also, the tachometer was bad, and the customer stated if you smack the dash really hard, things would start to come back alive. That's a pretty clear indicator that the cluster is the problem. So the cluster is out, it's boxed up, it's actually waiting to go on its way to Florida. I have a buddy in Boca Raton who runs amplifier and radio repair service there in Boca Raton. He works on a lot of the dealerships, Bentleys, Rolls-Royce electronics, all kinds of high-end electronics for some of the dealerships in the Miami area. I trust his knowledge. He's helped me out a lot of times. Totally a trustworthy guy. I messaged him and said, can you do a Mercury cluster? He was like, sure, those are simple. So off it goes to him. I know he does good work. I'm not going to chance it anywhere else. So that will be repaired. We'll get that reinstalled. Let's go ahead and raise this car up and look underneath. So just like Bentleys and Audis that have air suspension, this also has rear air suspension. And you can't just put it on the lift and go for it because it could cause issues when you lower it back down. It could be totally flat. So we're going to need to put this in jack mode. No, not that kind of jacking. We're going to just push a switch to turn off jack mode for the car. Let me show you the switch. In the newer cars, it's usually some buttons in the instrument cluster or along the cluster or the center console, somewhere around there. Here on these vehicles, where it be a Crown Vic, a town car, a Grand Marquis, or a Marauder, they're in the trunk. There's the little switch here that says off. I'll push it. There we go. So if you have one of these Crown Vics, town cars, Marauders, Grand Marquis with air suspension in the back, make sure to hit that switch if you're going to jack up the rear end. One little story before we get started. This customer saw red fluid on the ground where this car is parked. He was concerned that this thing is leaking. It is not. It has no leaks. He ended up finding out that his wife had her car parked there and filled the transmission fluid and spilled some on the floor. So make sure you have all the facts straight before you start telling the mechanic, hey, look for leaks. They might just go ahead and say, yeah, you got a leak, and take your money and make you look like a fool. Be careful with that, guys. The guy trusts me. Obviously, we don't do that here, but be very careful. The second thing is he just put new struts in the front, and now the front rides higher than the rear. Luckily, on these cars, the rear air suspension is adjustable. We'll get to that as we get down there. See, we can see our condenser here. It's got a few little dings in it, but otherwise it's not too bad. I don't see any wet spots like oil or anything coming out where it's been punctured. You can see his new struts right there. They look like they were quick struts, which is the spring and everything combined all in one unit. It makes it faster. We'll check the brakes, which are about 60% gone. They still have quite a bit of life. Nothing loose. Sway bar bushing link is good. Uh-oh. There is seepage. It's not leaking on the ground, but the AC compressor has got green oil coming out of it. I'll go ahead and let the customer know about that. This is a situation where we can just do the compressor only because the AC still works. There's nothing wrong, it just has a leak, so we'll just put a new compressor on, put a correct amount of oil and charge it back up and he'll be fine. Check over here, brakes are the same, nothing loose there, new struts in the front. Oil pan is nice and dry, and like I mentioned, he was worried about transmission fluid. As you can see, the whole pan, everything around the transmission is dry as a bone. The power steering was also dry as a bone. We come to the rear of the transmission where possibly there could be a leak there. No, there's no leak. All nice and dry. Check the U-joint there, and it's good. A nice dual exhaust. U-joint there is good. There is very minimal seepage coming from the pinion yoke seal. That's not enough to warrant a tear down. It's really not worth messing with. We'll check these brakes. They've got quite a bit of life left in them. They're probably 30% gone. Check our sway bar link and it's good. Here's our air bags. Nice and taut. Shocks are nice and dry. Airbag and a nice dry shock. There is a tiny little tear in the boot here, but it's really nothing to worry about. It's not a big deal. Here's our fuel tank, and you can see there's where you do the fuel pump. The little circular chrome colored access there. Here's our charcoal canister. Many times where people have talked about on these cars, evap leak, they've hit something or something's come through. You can see there's already a gouge here. It's already hit something. That can easily crack the canister and cause a check engine light. Make sure you check that if you have an evap leak. Here's our nice dual exhaust. This is stock, I believe, on this car. The tires are still good all around. So let's take a look at adjusting the suspension on this. Here's our ride height sensor. It's back here by the rear differential, actually right above it. And this little rod that goes between here, there is adjustments that can be made to change the ride height. And that's what we've done, and we got it sitting perfectly level with the front now. So that was a very simple, very easy fix. So that pretty much concludes what we've got going on with this Mercury. No, it doesn't. We didn't turn the suspension back on. That's a small mistake that you can make in a shop, and you will get an angry phone call. Let's turn on his suspension. There we are, back on again. Those things can be overlooked by anyone, but especially me as a shop owner and also manager of the shop, kind of like a foreman. Those things are always in the back of my mind when one of my technicians is backing a car out and I think, did they turn on that switch? Did they do this? Did they do that? And you ask them and they're like, I think so. And actually not. Usually they're really very good about it, but occasionally everyone makes a mistake. We got that taken care of. We'll get his cluster sent off. He'll take care of his radio. We got his ride height adjusted. We'll get an airflow sensor installed on this. Get the window regulator installed and the AC compressor replaced, and he'll be back in business. This customer showed up with the cash. I told him the total bill. I wasn't expecting anything, and next thing I know, he's in the office with a wad of cash. He says, go for it, Car Wizard. That's how you keep your mechanic happy, guys. No fighting, no bickering. Let's get it fixed. So Mrs. Wizard is going back to school. She's a teacher. She's going to start her new school year. She's been off for the summer, and soon she will not be off anymore. So we're going to change our schedule slightly. We will now move our Saturday videos to Sunday. That's it, guys. It's really not big of a change, but we're moving to Sundays for our Saturday video. If you're curious what kind of tools we use to work on Hoovie's old car, check my Amazon affiliates link in the description below. We get a small cut, and we really appreciate it. Make sure to hit the subscribe button, because as soon as I can get all these cars finally caught up and fixed, because we're really busy, then there'll be some more updates on this. Thanks for watching.